Here's the thing nobody tells you before they hand you an attachment style quiz. You are not anxious because you're insecure. You are not avoidant because you're cold. Your brain is running code that was written before you could talk, and it thinks it's keeping you alive. It's a fundamental misinterpretation of human biology that we've just culturally accepted as fact. We moralize these behaviors instead of recognizing them for what they actually are, which is an evolutionary survival mechanism. So welcome to the deep dive. Today we are dismantling the pop psychology versions of attachment theory that you see in those 60-second videos on social media, and we're replacing them with the complex neurological reality that dictates almost every romantic interaction you have ever had. On the desk today, we're looking at the foundational book, Attached, The New Science of Adult Attachment, alongside some fascinating clinical papers detailing the genetics and biology of adult attachment. What's vital to establish up front is the background of the primary researcher here. Amir Levine isn't a dating coach. He's not a relationship guru trying to sell you a matchmaking course. He is a psychiatrist and neuroscientist at Columbia University, and he wrote this book after noticing something in his clinical research that almost every other relationship book completely ignores. The need for closeness isn't a preference. It's wired into the exact same part of your brain that regulates hunger, thirst, and pain. Same category, same urgency, and that fundamentally changes the conversation. When we look at early childhood neurodevelopment, specifically John Bowlby's foundational work in the 1950s, we see that when an infant is separated from its caregiver, it doesn't experience sadness. It's not just a bad mood. It experiences a life or death neurological crisis. In our evolutionary history, a baby separated from its tribe is a dead baby. So the attachment system is a biological alarm designed to ensure physical survival. So if you have ever called yourself too needy, or you've been called that by someone else, an ex, a parent, whoever, here is the correction. You weren't broken. You were following a survival program that is older than language itself. And by the end of this deep dive, you are going to understand exactly why you keep ending up in the exact same relationship dynamic, just with a different face on it. And you're going to hear the actual science that those quick online summaries completely skip. Because the problem with those online summaries is they usually just list the three styles: anxious, avoidant, secure. They give you a quiz, show you a little chart, and say, done. But if you understand the styles before you understand the biological engine driving them, you end up misusing the information entirely. You turn it into a static label. I'm just anxious. That's who I am. Deal with it. Treating this as a personality trait completely ruins Levine's scientific premise. Attachment isn't a mood, it's a biological system. And while it evolved to keep infants close to the caregivers who keep them alive, that biological system doesn't just shut off when you turn 18 and move out of your parents' house. It just finds a new target. The system reorients. So in adulthood, your romantic partner becomes the central figure your nervous system is now wired to monitor for safety. And this is not romantic, poetic language. This is a literal physiological reality. Your brain performs a continuous threat assessment on your relationship. In the exact same way, it unconsciously scans a physical room for exits or danger. So when you walk into a crowded room, your brain notes the doors. When you are in a relationship, your brain is running a background algorithm, asking, are they there for me? Are they responsive? If I need them right now, will they engage? And if the brain's algorithm calculates a no, or even an I'm not sure, the attachment system activates. For an infant, that looks like crying. For an adult, it triggers a cascade of stress hormones meant to compel you to re-establish proximity to your partner. When these concepts are stripped of their neurobiology, they get weaponized. People use them to pathologize their partners. My ex is just an avoidant narcissist. But when you root this in biology, the paradigm shifts from judgment to empathy. If you understand that an anxiously attached partner who is texting you repeatedly isn't trying to control you, but is actually experiencing a physiological panic response akin to being abandoned in the wilderness, it changes how you react. It changes the script from, you are doing this to annoy me, to, your biology is overriding your logic right now. You're looking at a nervous system in distress, not a character flaw. And to fully grasp how profound this biological link is, we have to look at the science that almost every single video on this book stops short of explaining. Levine references something called social baseline theory, and this is where it gets incredibly fascinating. Social baseline theory is essentially the neurological proof that human beings were never designed to function as solitary units. The theory suggests that the human brain has a default baseline assumption about how much effort and metabolic energy the world requires of you. But that default assumption physically alters depending on whether you deeply believe someone has your back. Let's break down the Coan fMRI study, because this is the closest thing science has to proof that love is literally an operating system upgrade. Dr. James Coan put individuals into an fMRI scanner, which measures blood flow to different regions of the brain in real time, so we can see exactly what areas are active. He told the participants that they might receive a mild electric shock on their ankle, and anticipation of physical pain usually causes the brain's threat centers, like the hypothalamus and the amygdala, to light up. The brain is actively bracing for impact, budgeting resources to deal with a physical threat, which requires massive metabolic energy. He ran the experiment under 3 different conditions. In one condition, the person in the scanner held nobody's hand. In the second, they held the hand of a completely random stranger. And in the third, they held their romantic partner's hand. The results of those fMRI scans are staggering. The individuals holding their partner's hand showed the lowest activity in the brain regions associated with threat and distress, lower than holding a stranger's hand, and far lower than holding nothing. Holding a secure partner's hand essentially neutralized the neurological threat response. But the part that usually gets left out of the summaries isn't just that they felt calmer, it's the specific regions of the brain that powered down. It wasn't just the fear centers, it was the regions responsible for regulating effort and energy expenditure, the prefrontal cortex. When you are securely attached to someone, your brain literally stops budgeting metabolic resources for that threat entirely. It offloads the calculation. It assumes the other person is handling part of the cognitive and physical load. Levine refers to this phenomenon as borrowed strength. Your nervous system recognizes the physical presence of a secure attachment figure as an extension of your own survival resources. Think of it like a computer network. Your brain is literally recruiting your partner as spare processing power. You are outsourcing your memory and effort. It's not just feeling supported. You physically have more cognitive bandwidth available for other tasks because your brain isn't running the survival algorithms alone. And this explains neurologically why isolation is so uniquely dangerous for human beings. It's not simply that we get lonely or sad, it's that our brains were never built to run the full calculation of survival alone. We were built to split the load. So when you are socially isolated, your brain has to run all the threat assessments, all the environmental scanning, all the energy budgeting entirely by itself, which means your nervous system is in a constant low-grade state of overdrive. It's metabolically exhausting, and that chronic stress leads to elevated cortisol, which degrades the immune system, increases blood pressure, and leads to physical illness. There's a study by Dr. Brian Baker at the University of Toronto regarding blood pressure. If you have mild hypertension, being in a satisfying, secure marriage actually lowers your blood pressure to healthier levels when you are around your partner. But if you're in a highly distressed marriage, just being in the same room as your partner causes your blood pressure to spike, which means we are quite literally regulating each other's physiology. Your partner's nervous system is plugging directly into yours. So if you are trying to sync your operating system with someone whose code is fundamentally incompatible with yours, your biology is going to suffer. So let's finally get into the code itself. Let's break down the 4 styles, but go a layer deeper than those surface level descriptions. The research shows about 50% of the population is secure, 20% is anxious, 25% is avoidant, and a rare 5% is a combination known as fearful-avoidant. Let's begin with the anxious attachment style. Biologically, people with an anxious style possess a hypervigilant attachment system. Their neurological radar for distance or relational threat is incredibly sensitive. They have a massive capacity for intimacy, but their internal working model operates on the fear that their partner doesn't want to be as close as they do, or that their partner will eventually leave. When their radar detects a threat, and that threat could be something massive like an argument, or something microscopic like a text message taking 3 hours to get a reply, or even just a slight shift in a partner's tone of voice, their attachment system kicks on. The book calls this hyperactivation. Hyperactivation completely hijacks the brain. The amygdala fires, cortisol floods the system, and rational thought is heavily suppressed by the emotional imperative to re-establish connection. So when an anxious person is hyperactivated, they cannot focus on work. They cannot sleep properly. They are entirely consumed by the perceived threat to the attachment. And that biological panic leads to what Levine calls protest behaviors. These are actions taken to force the partner to pay attention and re-establish the bond. Protest behavior can look like calling or texting excessively, but it can also take much more covert, almost manipulative forms. It's keeping score, thinking, they ignored me all morning, so I'm gonna wait exactly 6 hours to text them back. It's acting hostile, rolling your eyes or storming out of a room, hoping they follow you. It can even escalate to threatening to leave the relationship, saying things like, I don't think we're right for each other, when what they actually want is for the partner to panic, grab them, and say, I can't live without you. The tragic irony of protest behavior is that its goal is to pull the partner closer, but the hostility and the game playing almost always end up pushing the partner further away, especially if that partner is avoidant. Which brings us to the avoidant attachment style, and we really need to spend some time here, because this is the most misunderstood dynamic in the entire framework. The common perception is that avoidant people are just cold, independent loners who don't care about intimacy. But biologically, avoidance is not indifference. This is a massive paradigm shift for anyone who has ever been hurt by an avoidant partner. Avoidance is an active, metabolically expensive suppression strategy. People with an avoidant attachment style have the exact same evolutionary biological need for closeness as anyone else. However, somewhere in their early development, their brain learned to equate intimacy with the loss of autonomy or with emotional danger. So when an anxious person's threat system is triggered by distance, the avoidant person's threat system is triggered by proximity. When things get too intimate, or emotional demands are placed on them, their alarm bells ring just as loudly. But instead of hyperactivating and pursuing, their brain utilizes deactivating strategies. They shut the system down. They consciously and subconsciously put up barriers to create space and regulate their own nervous system. The book lists several of these deactivating strategies, and they are fascinating because they often look like completely rational choices to the avoidant person. One is focusing intensely on minor, irrelevant flaws. Suddenly, an avoidant person who is deeply in love will decide the relationship has to end because of the way their partner chews their food, or the specific pitch of their laugh, or the way they dress. The brain magnifies a tiny flaw into a total deal breaker to justify creating distance. Another classic deactivating strategy is pining for the phantom ex. They will romanticize a past relationship, convincing themselves that their ex was their one true soulmate. But here's the catch. They only romanticize the ex because the ex is unavailable. If the ex actually came back, their avoidance system would trigger again, and they'd push the ex away too. The phantom ex is just a tool to keep their current partner at a safe emotional distance. It allows them to say, I'm just not feeling that spark I had with my ex, when what they're really doing is avoiding present intimacy. And here is the neurological data that blows the whole cold and indifferent myth completely out of the water. Researchers have conducted studies where avoidant individuals are hooked up to physiological monitors tracking sweat gland activity, heart rate, and skin conductance, all markers of stress. They are then asked to discuss themes of separation, loss, or relationship conflict. Outwardly, they look completely calm. They might shrug, give brief answers, or claim they don't really care. The external presentation is a total emotional flatline, but the physiological monitors show something entirely different. Their internal markers of stress spike just as highly as someone with an anxious attachment style. Their heart rate accelerates, their skin conductance rises, the threat is registering deeply in their nervous system, but their prefrontal cortex is actively clamping down on the emotional expression of that fear. So they don't turn the alarm off. They just build a soundproof concrete bunker around it, so they don't have to acknowledge it. They are essentially white-knuckling their way through a biological panic attack by going completely numb. That is a radically different picture than someone who just doesn't care. Then we have the rare 5%, the anxious-avoidant, sometimes called fearful-avoidant. This is a highly complex state where the individual's nervous system is essentially caught in a perpetual crossfire. It is the most disorganized of the styles. Their nervous system craves intimacy deeply, triggering anxious hyperactivation when they are alone. But the moment someone gets close, their avoidant deactivating strategies kick in, viewing that proximity as a severe threat. So they are trapped, oscillating between intense pursuit and sudden, jarring withdrawal. It usually requires significant therapeutic work to unravel because their baseline operating system associates both distance and closeness with danger, which leaves the secure style about 50% of the population. But let's clarify this because I think people hear secure and picture a Zen monk who never gets jealous, never feels insecure, and is basically an emotionless robot. Secure people absolutely experience relationship anxiety. They feel the sting of distance, they notice when their partner is distracted, and they experience jealousy. But their internal working model, their default programming, interprets these bumps differently. When a secure person senses a disconnect, their brain's algorithm says, "This is temporary. My partner cares about me. We have a problem, so let's address it." They don't spiral into catastrophic thinking. A secure partner, in practice, is the person who texts you back without making you wait on purpose to prove a point. The person who says "that bothered me," instead of going silent for days and expecting you to read their mind. The person who doesn't keep you guessing about where you stand because they just tell you. And if you have an anxious or avoidant attachment style and you aren't used to that kind of steady, secure behavior, it will feel deeply unfamiliar. It feels boring. Many insecurely attached people will date a secure person and suddenly lose interest, claiming the person is just boring. We'll explore the biological mechanics of why that happens in a moment, because it's a massive roadblock to finding happiness. Before we move to that, there's a significant critique worth addressing, one that pushes back on how this book is often received. The critique argues that the book essentially gives anxious people a free pass, that it paints avoidants as cold villains who need to change, but tells anxious people their need for constant reassurance is totally normal, validating toxic, demanding behavior. So if someone is anxious and their biology is screaming at them to check their partner's phone, is the book telling them that's justified? That's a very astute critique, and it points to a frequent misreading of the book. The book does not validate toxic, invasive, or manipulative behavior. What it validates is the underlying biological need for proximity and reassurance. Separate the need from the action. The need to feel securely connected to your partner is a valid evolutionary instinct, but the protest behaviors used to satisfy that need, snooping through phones, threatening to leave, throwing tantrums, manipulating, those are highly destructive. The book argues that anxiously attached people need to learn how to communicate their valid needs through direct, healthy channels rather than acting out. The biological panic is understandable. The toxic behavior used to soothe it is not acceptable. That distinction is crucial, validating the physiological feeling, but requiring accountability for the behavior. But this brings us to the ultimate question. If secure people are so great and so communicative, why do anxious and avoidant people seem to magnetically attract each other? It's a cliche for a reason. The book calls this the anxious-avoidant trap. It is the most common and perhaps the most agonizing, dysfunctional relationship pattern in existence, and it's not happening because opposites attract in some cosmic romantic sense. It happens because their respective biological coping mechanisms fit perfectly into a self-perpetuating feedback loop. Let's trace the mechanics of the trap. How does it actually close on these two people? It usually begins when the anxious partner perceives a slight distance. Their threat system hyperactivates to soothe their nervous system, and they pursue. They might call multiple times or intensely seek verbal validation. Initially, this pursuit works. It bridges the gap, and the avoidant partner, who also desires connection at a baseline level, responds positively and offers a small dose of closeness. So the anxious person gets the reassurance, their amygdala powers down, they feel immense relief and extreme closeness. But that exact moment of extreme closeness, that intense merging, is precisely what the avoidant partner's nervous system registers as a threat to their autonomy. They suddenly feel suffocated, trapped, or overwhelmed by the anxious person's emotional intensity. So the avoidant prefrontal cortex kicks in with a deactivating strategy. They withdraw. They act distant. They suddenly need to focus on work, or they pick a fight over something trivial to create space. And that sudden withdrawal is the ultimate trigger for the anxious partner. The anxious alarm system instantly flares back up, causing them to pursue even harder. So the closer the anxious person tries to get, the more threatened the avoidant person feels. One partner's activation directly fuels the other partner's deactivation. They are trapped on a neurological hamster wheel, constantly exacerbating each other's core wounds. And as this loop continues, they start to emotionally compensate. They basically co-create a warped reality. The avoidant person puffs up their sense of independence, constantly reinforcing the idea that they don't need anybody, which directly validates the anxious person's deepest, darkest fear that they are inadequate, too needy, and fundamentally unlovable. The book uses a case study to illustrate this. Tamara and Greg. Tamara has an anxious style. Greg is highly avoidant. Greg would constantly send mixed signals. He would plan a romantic weekend, be incredibly affectionate, and then completely shut down for 3 days, refusing to answer calls. Tamara's nervous system was in a constant state of whiplash. She would resort to severe protest behavior, showing up at his apartment unannounced, trying to make him jealous with other men. They lived in this chronic, agonizing state of emotional distance, punctuated only by brief, explosive moments of reconciliation. And what's truly tragic is that couples like Tamara and Greg don't just do this for a few weeks. People stay in this agonizing trap for years, decades. The reason they stay brings us to what might be the most culturally subversive point in the entire book. It's about how we fundamentally misunderstand the feeling of love. We have a global cultural confusion between chemistry and dysregulation. This is a very difficult reality for many people to accept. The excitement you feel in these turbulent push-pull relationships, that heart-pounding suspense, the obsessive analyzing of every message, the euphoric high when they finally call you back after ignoring you, that isn't intimacy, it is nervous system dysregulation. We call it the roller coaster effect. Your stomach drops, your palms sweat, your heart races. Physiologically, what is happening is that your brain is being flooded with stress hormones. Cortisol and adrenaline are coursing through your veins during the withdrawal phase. You're in a state of biological panic. Then, when the avoidant partner finally gives you a breadcrumb of attention, your brain releases a massive hit of dopamine to reward the survival of the attachment. It's essentially an addiction loop. The brain starts equating this highly activated, highly stressed attachment system with love. You condition yourself to believe that if you aren't feeling anxiety, you aren't feeling love. And our culture completely reinforces this. Every rom-com, every pop song, every romance novel trains us to chase this exact feeling of suspense and drama. We are taught that true love is supposed to be hard-won, that it involves overcoming massive emotional walls, and that passion is defined by dramatic reunions. We romanticize the struggle. We are literally socially programmed to be attracted to the exact individuals whose nervous systems are least equipped to make us happy. And this is why, when an anxiously attached person finally goes on a date with a secure person, it often falls flat. The secure person is transparent. They reply promptly. They express interest clearly, without playing games. And the anxious person walks away saying, they're really nice. They check all the boxes, but there's just no spark. But the reason there's no spark is because their nervous system isn't panicking. The amygdala isn't firing. The cortisol isn't spiking. We are literally mistaking the nausea of a biological threat response for the butterflies of romance. It is a profound misattribution of arousal. You're mistaking the absence of panic for boredom. But from an evolutionary biological standpoint, a healthy attachment should not feel like a roller coaster. It should feel like solid ground. As Levine notes in the book, still waters run deep. A secure attachment system is calm. It allows your nervous system to rest, which transitions perfectly into a phrase from the book that completely dismantles decades of modern self-help advice. We're talking about the dependency paradox. If you look at pop psychology, self-help books, and endless social media infographics, there is a pervasive narrative that independence is the ultimate psychological strength. We are told that needing someone is codependent, that it's a weakness. The mantra is that you must be completely self-sufficient and completely happy on your own before you can successfully love someone else. But Levine uses the underlying biology to completely tear this idea apart. The book states it directly. Numerous studies show that once we become attached to someone, the two of us form one physiological unit. Our partner regulates our blood pressure, our heart rate, our breathing. The emphasis on differentiation that is held by most of today's popular psychology approaches to adult relationships does not hold water from a biological perspective. Dependency is a fact. It is not a choice or a preference. We are biologically hardwired to depend on our attachment figures. And this leads us to the core of the dependency paradox. The paradox is that biology proves that people who fully embrace this dependency, who have their attachment needs consistently met by a secure partner, actually become more independent, more confident, and more willing to take risks in the outside world. It's worth digging into the how of this. How does allowing yourself to be totally dependent on someone actually make you more independent? There's research from Dr. Brooke Feeney at Carnegie Mellon University's Relationship Lab that proves this. Feeney wanted to observe how a partner's support directly impacts an individual's willingness to explore and tackle challenges. She had couples come into the lab and instructed one partner to discuss their personal goals, career aspirations, and exploratory opportunities with the other partner, while she monitored the interactions to see who was providing a secure base and who was being avoidant or dismissive. She found a direct correlation. When participants felt their goals were genuinely supported by their partner, when the partner engaged, asked questions, and provided a reliable, secure base, the participants' physiology and psychology shifted. They reported an immediate increase in self-esteem and an elevated mood. More importantly, they actually rated the likelihood of achieving their goals significantly higher than they did before the discussion. Their brain basically said, I have backup, therefore I can take a bigger risk. And what happened to the participants whose partners were unsupportive or avoidant during the discussion? The exact opposite. Without that secure base, they were noticeably less open to discussing their goals. They didn't confidently examine ways to achieve them, and they actually tended to downgrade their ambitions and lower their expectations for themselves during the course of the conversation. Their brain calculated that they were operating without a safety net, so it restricted their exploratory drive to conserve energy. So true independence doesn't come from needing no one. It comes from secure dependency, having your attachment needs met quietly and consistently in the background. Knowing someone unconditionally has your back gives your nervous system the stability to confidently go out and explore the world. The people who look the most fiercely independent, the ones taking massive swings in their careers or creative lives, are often the ones who have a deeply secure, dependent relationship waiting for them at home. As Levine puts it, the more effectively dependent people are on one another, the more independent and daring they become. When your attachment system is secure, your brain's resources are freed up for creativity, ambition, and self-actualization. So this all sounds amazing if you have a secure partner. But what if you're realizing right now that your nervous system is completely hijacked, that you are deeply anxious or incredibly avoidant, and you are currently trapped in this toxic cycle? Is your biology your destiny? Are you just doomed to repeat this forever? You are absolutely not doomed. One of the most hopeful findings in adult attachment research revolves around neuroplasticity. Attachment styles are stable, meaning they won't change on their own, but they are plastic. They can be consciously molded over time. You can rewire your neural pathways to earn security. So how does that biological rewiring actually work? What is the practical mechanism for someone trying to change their operating system? The book outlines a process that begins with priming for security. Your brain learns through observation and repetition. Priming means consciously identifying a secure role model in your life, and it doesn't have to be a romantic partner. It could be a parent, a trusted friend, a sibling, or even a couple you know who handles conflict and affection with grace and stability. You study them, you observe them, you mentally review how they interact. You visualize how they respond when their partner is stressed, how they offer support without feeling suffocated, or how they communicate a boundary without resorting to hostility. This works because of how our mirror neurons function. Simply recalling a past relationship with a secure person, or closely observing a secure role model, physically activates the neural networks in your brain associated with safety. Over time, according to Hebb's law, which states that neurons that fire together, wire together, you strengthen those secure pathways, making them easier to access during moments of stress. So you build the neurological template, but then you have to actually apply it in real time when your threat system flares up. You have to replace those destructive coping mechanisms, the protest behaviors for the anxious and the deactivating strategies for the avoidant, with effective communication. Effective communication is rooted in the radical acceptance that your needs are biologically valid. If you are anxious, you literally need reassurance to regulate your nervous system. If you are avoidant, you literally need a moment of space to down-regulate. So instead of acting out to manipulate your partner into giving you those things, you state them clearly, respectfully, and non-apologetically. Which leads to one of the most practical tools from the book. Just like the police are legally obligated to read you your rights when you are arrested, you have the right to remain silent, and so on. Levine argues that you should proactively read your dates their rights and your needs very early on in the relationship. It's a brilliant framework for navigating the early stages of dating, which are usually characterized by game playing and hiding your true self. The new Miranda law says you must assert your relationship needs authentically right from the start. You wear your heart on your sleeve. Now, this sounds completely terrifying in practice. If you're anxious and you go on a third date with someone and you sit across the table and say, "Hey, just so you know, I have an anxious attachment style, and my nervous system requires a partner who replies consistently and provides frequent verbal reassurance that we are okay." Doesn't that just make you look incredibly needy? Won't that immediately scare people away? That is exactly the point. It is designed to act as a highly calibrated filter. If you state your needs directly and authentically, a secure person's nervous system will not perceive that as a threat. They will respond with care and clarity. They might say, "I completely understand that. I'm happy to communicate with you, but I do work long hours on Tuesdays, so I may be slow to reply." Then they engage with the need. But an avoidant person's threat system will flare up immediately at that level of emotional directness. They will show visible discomfort. They might subtly shame you, call you too intense, or they might just ghost you completely after the date. And the instinct is to feel rejected by that. But the ghosting is actually a feature, not a bug. By scaring them away early with your authentic needs, you just saved yourself years of agony in the anxious-avoidant trap. The quality of their response to your Miranda moment speaks volumes about their biological capacity to be a secure base for you. You are stress testing the attachment potential before you invest your metabolic energy into the bond. That reframes the entire dating process. Rejection isn't a failure. It's a successful filtering of incompatible operating systems. But let's say you use the Miranda law. You successfully filter the dating pool, and you find a secure partner, or you and your current partner do the hard neurological work to earn security together. Does that mean you just sail off into the sunset? Secure couples still fight, don't they? Absolutely they do. The book refers to these as bread and butter conflicts. When you merge two separate lives with different habits and preferences, you will inevitably clash over daily issues, the division of chores, how to spend money, how much time to spend with in-laws, or what temperature to keep the apartment. Levine outlines 5 secure principles for resolving conflict, and they're worth walking through because they are so practical. Principle number 1, show basic concern for the other person's well-being, even when you are furious with them. Principle number 2, maintain focus on the specific problem at hand, meaning if you are arguing about the dishes, do not bring up a mistake they made on a vacation 3 years ago. Principle number 3, refrain from generalizing. Stop using absolute statements like "you always do this" or "you never listen to me." Principle number 4 is the willingness to engage rather than using avoidant deactivating strategies like stonewalling or walking out of the house. And principle number 5 is effectively communicating your underlying feelings and needs rather than just yelling about the surface level trigger. Now, it's vital to understand that this isn't just a list of polite conversational etiquette. There is a deep biological mechanism at play when you use these principles. This is where we bring in oxytocin. Oxytocin is a hormone and neuropeptide that heavily promotes social cohesion, trust, and pair bonding. When you are in an argument, cortisol is rising, but when you employ these secure principles, when you pause mid-argument to show genuine concern for your partner's emotional state or validate their perspective even while disagreeing, You create micro moments of safety, and those moments of safety allow oxytocin to be released into the brain, and the oxytocin directly counteracts the cortisol. It downregulates the amygdala. By prioritizing your partner's emotional safety during a fight, you prevent the conflict from escalating into a full-blown attachment threat. So insecure couples fight to win the argument, which inevitably damages the attachment, but a secure person recognizes that the relationship itself is the priority. Instead of trying to dominate with logic or hostility, they try to heal the breach in the attachment. It's like applying a biological tourniquet to the relationship, rather than letting it bleed out over whose turn it is to take out the trash. A secure person instinctively knows that winning a logistical argument is useless if you destroy the biological safety of the bond in the process. They purposefully lower the temperature. And the beauty of neuroplasticity is that these skills can be learned and practiced until they become your brain's new default response to conflict. Pull back and recap the ground we've covered today. We started by fundamentally reframing our view of relationships, understanding that our intense needs for closeness or space are not character flaws but ancient survival codes wired into our brains. We explored social baseline theory and the Coan fMRI study, proving that holding a partner's hand literally offloads the brain's energy expenditure and acts as a neurological upgrade. We mapped out the biological crossfire of the anxious-avoidant dance, detailing how one person's pursuit directly triggers the other's withdrawal. We realized that the stomach-dropping anxiety and obsessive suspense we were culturally taught to call chemistry or passion might actually just be biological dysregulation. And finally, we embrace the profound truth of the dependency paradox, that securely depending on someone, having that solid base behind you, is the exact mechanism that sets you free to be fiercely independent in the world. It is a complete paradigm shift in how we understand human connection. So I want to reiterate the core message of Amir Levine's work. Your relationship needs are valid, period. You are allowed to require closeness, and you are allowed to require space, but you have the responsibility to communicate those needs effectively, and you have to find someone whose biological operating system is compatible with yours. And if you are currently trying to extract yourself from a relationship that is fundamentally incompatible, if you are trapped in that anxious-avoidant loop and finding it agonizingly difficult to walk away, here's one final jarring scientific fact buried deep in the clinical research. It's regarding what researchers call the rebound effect. Neuroscientists have conducted fMRI brain imaging scans on individuals who have recently gone through an unwanted breakup, looking at the brain's response to the severing of an attachment bond. The scans show that the exact same areas of the brain that light up in severe agony when a person physically breaks a leg or sustains a severe bodily injury, specifically the somatosensory cortex and the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, are heavily activated when they split up with their partner. The pain of heartbreak is not a metaphor. Your brain processes the departure of an attachment figure in a way that is neurologically indistinguishable from a shattered bone. Your biology registers the loss of a partner as a physical trauma. So if your brain registers a breakup the exact same way it registers a shattered femur, maybe it is time we completely change how we talk about heartbreak. Maybe it's time we stop telling ourselves and our friends to just get over it, or that there are plenty of fish in the sea. If the neurological reality of our brain shows a jagged traumatic break when we lose love, then we need to start treating a broken heart with the exact same medical respect, the exact same patience, the exact same dedicated time to heal as we would a broken leg.